Hi, I'm Dr. Mark Potter, the Superintendent of the Liverpool Central School District, and this presentation is the overview of the 2019-2020 school budget. Just to give you a brief overview of our agenda, I'm going to talk just a little bit about the budget development philosophy, the estimated appropriations and revenues, the tax cap calculation, our vehicle purchase plan, the Town of Salina and Town of Clay tax rate impact, the budget propositions, and just a brief change in the vote location and giving you the vote date. So from a developmental process for creating the budget, we want to begin with the idea that we want to maintain our existing programs, provide resources to support strategic plan initiatives, support facility improvements in all of our school buildings, and additionally support socioeconomic needs or innovation or STEAM or STEM initiatives, the social emotional needs, and at least find or create some alternatives to our traditional discipline measures. Here are our estimated appropriations, and as you can see, we've given 3 years of comparison. The far left is the 17-18 budget, and we move to the 18-19, which is our current budget, and our proposed 19-20, and in between each are the changes, the percentage changes, and we'll use an example of the 18-19, which is our current, to our proposed. I'll go to the bottom. Our current budget is about $546,148, and our proposed budget is about $160.4 million, which is about 1.85% different. Similarly, this is the estimated revenue. Again, same thing with a 17-18 budget on the left. Down the middle is the current 18-19 budget, and on the far right is our projected 19-20. These are our areas of revenue: the real property or the local property tax, the state aid, federal aid, fund balance, and other, which you can see is made up in the bottom with sales tax, pilots, etc. Again, same thing, $157.5 million in our current budget, an increase of about 1.85%, making our proposed or projected budget about $160.4 million. So the tax cap was created in 2011 to try to help both the community and the school districts predict what the local levy or the percentage the levy was going to be provided to the community or levied on the community. As we all know, there are exemptions, and I think with some expectation, the tax cap is or was supposed to be 2%. Rarely is it 2% because of the exemptions, both with capital building or building improvements, as well as pilots, payments in lieu of taxes, which are those agreements with the town. Here's the actual tax cap calculation for the upcoming 19-20 school year, and as you can see the calculation, you start out up at the top with the prior year's tax levy, and through the use of various adjustments, we get to the bottom, which is the maximum allowable levy estimate and the percentage increase from the current levy to the proposed levy. One of the important points I continue to make is the difference between our current pilots, about $1.6 million, and our proposed pilots for next year, which is $427. As those pilots have come off, those agreements have lapsed, those particular companies have to be added to the tax roll, which makes up a portion of that increase. Another way of presenting the tax cap information is through a percentage of what makes up those changes. So as you can see at the top, the current tax cap calculation is 2.0677, and that's made up by no growth in Liverpool during the past year in building, essentially. The consumer price index makes up about 1.93%. Our debt for our capital construction building improvements is about 0.22%, and the pilots made up about 0.08% or 0.9%. So we look at the proposed budget, it does look in the tax cap calculation like it's significantly higher, but one important point is the fact that there's 0.5% of growth. So when you look at the tax cap and you look at the levy, that 0.5% is picked up purely by those people building new construction. The CPI, or the Consumer Price Index, is essentially the same from this year to next year. The capital or construction debt is down significantly, and then the pilots make up the remaining. And the pilots will pay 100%. Those organizations that were on pilot agreements coming onto the tax rolls will now pay 100% of that 1.4% in the levy. So looking specifically at the budget adjustments, there was minimal state funding increase. As I mentioned, some pilot agreements have phased out and they're now added to the tax rolls, making up that difference. We've done some renegotiations with health insurance, specifically with prescriptions. We're in the middle of collective bargaining and negotiations with 2 units. As I mentioned, we have used fund balance and other reserves to help balance the budget. There is a slight reduction in BOCES services and such BOCES costs, and there's a minimal reduction in staffing through attrition of 1.8 full-time equivalent positions. So in summary, the budget-to-budget increase from the current 18-19 to the 19-20 school year is about 1.85% budget-to-budget. We'll be using about $3.5 million in appropriated fund balance as an increase of about $500,000. As I mentioned, there's a reduction of 1.8 full-time equivalent positions district-wide. The local tax levy is about 3.9%, and as I mentioned, about 1.42 is because of the phase-outs of pilots, which those companies pick up 100% of that change. The difference in state aid from the current year to next year is about 1.12%, and there are no program reductions. So looking at the tax rate, slightly different than the tax levy, the increase per $100,000 home is about $75. And an important point to make, a portion of this increase is due to the tax change or the reassessment of the Great Northern Mall due to its recent sale. Important point to remind folks, the final assessments and equalization rates are not set by the school district, but rather by the towns. The calculations need to be finalized. The tax rates are not available from the towns of Clay or Salina until late August. As such, there's typically a change in the tax rates, and they're often lower than estimated. Here are the propositions. Proposition 1 is you'd be voting on the proposed budget, and as I mentioned, is a 1.85% increase, approximately $160,463,190. Proposition 2 is an ask of the community to reconsider the $5.8 million that was voted on in December. There was an error in the language created by the attorneys. They had noted a 2009 capital reserve. The Commissioner of Education did not allow us to move forward with this. We have to ask the community to reapprove with the correct 2016 capital reserve fund to be used. Again, this has no impact financially on the community. 100% of this increase is picked up between the state and the capital reserve. Proposition 3 is our district vehicle purchases. As you can see here, there are 8 large buses, approximately 1,037,000. There are 2 small buses with air conditioning and a wheelchair lift. There's 1 small bus with just air conditioning. There's a 1-ton dump truck with a plow. There's a 1-ton dump truck with an extended cab and a plow. As you can see, the first 3, the large buses and the small buses, are all aided. We would be paying approximately 25% of the actual cost for those vehicles. Proposition 4 is a very small project over at the Transportation Center. We'd like to replace the fueling station at a cost of approximately $180,000. Again, being a transportation facility, we would be picking up approximately 85% of that cost returned to us in building aid. So we're paying approximately 15% of the actual cost. So looking at some significant dates, back on February 25th, I did the draft presentation for the Board of Education. On April 22nd, the board approved the proposed budget to be voted on. On May 7th, the public hearing will be provided to the board and to the community at 6:30 in the Board of Education room. And on May 21st, the New York State Public Vote Day from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. And this will not be at the gymnasium at the high school, but rather in the gymnasium at the Wetzel Road Elementary Building due to construction. And again, the district vote is May 21st at the Wetzel Road Gymnasium. If interested, the board candidates, and there are 4 of them, who will be presenting their stances and their information at the public hearing, which is May 7th, Tuesday, in the boardroom at 6:30. Thank you very much, and if you have questions, please reach out to the district office.